Okay, so we're ready to start the apple. I'm going to shade the apple. As you guys can see, got all my stuff out here. You should have all of your pencils. It's always good to have a regular pencil, so you can use that small eraser on the end of it. I have both my pink and my kneaded eraser out. I have my shading worksheet. I'm going to use that as a reference, and I'm going to refer to it a lot while we're shading the apple. And then in addition to this, I still have my 2 pieces of scrap paper. Okay? So, first thing I want to do is let's kind of talk about this first. So the apple is very much, it's got a lot of similarities to the sphere. Okay? But there's a lot of things that are different between the two things. One, this is not a perfect sphere. The apple is not a perfect sphere. There's bumps, bruises. It's not symmetrical. It's got the stem at the top, so it's got a lot of things that are different than it. But at the same time, if you guys look, both are forms, okay? Round forms. Now, again, my light source is coming from the right, okay? That's why I have the lightest area of the background on the right, which is white, and it goes to the medium dark over here to the left. The same thing's going to happen with not just my apple, but it's also going to happen with my construction paper when we go to do that, okay? So my lightest areas of my apples are going to be here. It's going to get darker as it goes down here away from it, because that's getting blocked from the light. The light's not hitting it. You're also going to notice, too, that you're probably going to have some highlights and some glares hitting the very top of your apple, almost kind of like, looks like there's a crown sitting on it. And you might even have some highlights or some glares happening, again, on the lightest side of your apple. I also have some secondary highlights, like right here at the top, on the sides. And then I also have a highlight actually inside of this valley here, too. But one of the things that I can see right now when I look at this is that I probably have my valley a little too high. I have a lot that I need to get included into this right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to erase my stem, but I am going to erase this valley, and I'm going to redraw that. I need to get my, I'll just use this. I'm going to redraw it so it's a little bit lower. And I'm just going to extend my stem down. Just kind of complete that. I just needed to make that a little bit lower because I have a lot that I need to do above this valley. Okay, so I'm going to start shading. Now again, this is just the way I shade. There's a lot of different things that, ways you could approach this. I am going to grab this apple though before I start to kind of point out a few things. One, here's another thing that's so different from the apple and the sphere, okay? Try to make sure all this is in the screen. So if you look at this sphere, it's all nice and smooth. Every value gradates into another. But when you look at this apple, you'll see, one, that there are several different colors we're dealing with here. We've got yellow, we've got oranges, and we've got reds, okay? And you can even see on parts of the apple where you see a lot of lines. We're going to include those. And you can see in some of these areas, like right here where the yellow is and there's some red lines, that there is no gradation happening whatsoever. I'm going to pay attention to that. There are going to be times in the drawing that I'm not going to be blending values at all. In fact, I want them to be different, okay? Yeah, but also, too, the other thing I want to point out is the direction that these lines are going. If you can see these lines and they curve around the form. We are going to use that as a guide for the direction that we are going to shade in. That's going to help make this look round. So I'm not going to be shading this apple going across like this, because if I do, it's going to make it look flat. But I am going to kind of follow these lines, and I'm going to shade with the lines and how they wrap around. Okay? And I can show you this finished, well, it's not finished, but it's got a good start. You can see again how some of these lines do not blend out. You can see how even too in some of these with the glares and the highlights, they stand out a lot. So I'm not blending everything in for a reason. Okay. So you should have, there's a yellow spot kind of on each one of your guys' apple. That yellow spot should be where your lightest area is on your apple. So I always make sure that that's the way it is in the morning, but you know, you never know. Somebody may have moved it. And I'm going to set this off to the side. I'm going to grab my 2 pieces of scrap paper. Actually, I only need 1. And I'm going to start with my 4H. I'm going to start in the darkest area because that's, for me, the safe place to start, because I know it's going to get really dark anyways. And I am going to, if you guys can kind of see, I am curving my shading around. So I'm looking at those lines on the apple as a guide on the direction that I should be shading. Again, I'm not going straight across or straight up and down because it's not a flat object, it's round, so I'm curving it. Now most of this side of the apple is going to get pretty dark at some point, so that's why I like starting here. Because if I mess up, I'm fine. It's going to get covered up. But this will also, too, provide a really good base for everything else that's going to go on top. Now I do have, again, some highlights up here that I need to make sure I keep white. This is where sometimes this needed, or the pencil eraser is handy. I already kind of went over too far. Kind of sketch where I need to skip over that. And then I'm getting closer also too to where that crown that sits on the top of the apple, and I call it a crown because it kind of looks like it has a crown on top. It's basically just one big highlight and kind of makes a ring at the top. So if you want to, you can kind of create an outline around it as far as where that needs to go. So I'm just going to kind of draw a shape. For that outline, and I know not to shade in that area then. Now I can go back to the business of adding my 4H. Now at some point when you do get to the middle of your apple, those lines don't always curve anymore, so the lines in the middle of the apple are pretty much just straight up and down. I'm almost to that point. And I'm going to turn my drawing just because it's easier for me to get these curves going the other way when it's turned. And again, I'm pretty much just filling in 4-H all over. I am the type of person that's constantly moving their paper, so if you're that way too, that's fine. Just wrap your shading around that form. Don't know how to do that? Look at those lines and the directions they're going in. That will help you. Got another highlight up here at the top. So now you can see how I've got my crown at the top of my apple blocked in. I'm also going to go ahead and give that valley that the stem sits into a layer of 4-H. So there's my layer of 4-H over the whole thing. Again, I've skipped a few areas, so I've got a highlight over here on the top on the left of my apple, a highlight over here on the right at the top of my apple, and then I have the crown of my apple that are still white. I'm not dealing with my stem until I'm actually finished shading the apple. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to my 3B pencil. Now this is where I start kind of building up some of the lines that I see. Again, I always like to start on the darkest part of the apple because that's kind of my safe place. If I mess up, that's all right. It's probably going to get darker anyways. And I'm going to pay attention to the shapes that those shadows are making on the apple. And in addition to that, I'm also going to keep track of the lines that I see. So I'm going to start dragging in some of this line work that I see the red make on the apple. So these are going to also too help just describe the form because those lines are curving around it. So again, our apples are going to be all made up of lots of smooth shading. You can see how I kind of added in some of those lines. I kind of work in sections at this point. So I find a few lines, I plug them in. I find a line next to it to plug in. I take note of the gaps between it, how these lines are curving. This is the part that I get to a lot of times with stuff like that, and I'm kind of, look at it at this stage, and I'm like, oh, this is not going well, or this looks like a hot mess. I say that to myself a lot. But I just keep working on it, and after a while, it kind of comes together a little bit better. Again, I'm just kind of working in sections. Now I'm getting close to where my yellow part of my apple is. Now with that, I'm basically kind of working around it. I'm not going to be putting, at least at this point, I don't think I'm going to be putting any 3B there. Now that's not to say I won't change my mind as I work on this. And there are times where I'm going to see this stuff look really nice and smooth, and there's other going to be times where I see lots of line, really defined lines. So I'm getting to the part where I have to work around that yellow. Now I've got to fill in some areas. So now I've got that line work on there. I just got to go in and kind of fill in some of this stuff. I think now I'm ready for my 6B. Again, I'm not looking for my darkest value yet. I'm going to reserve that for the end of the project. Darkest value I'm going to have on this at this point is just going to be like a medium dark. Go back in, add some of these lines that I might have lost that need to show up a little bit more. Now, if you guys notice, I have not dealt with that valley at the top where the stem is coming out. I have not done anything with that. So what we're looking for on this at this point is just a good start. It's not what you would call finished. So I'm still going in with my 6B and just kind of mess around with some of this stuff. All right, so there's kind of a start. Now what I'm going to do is go into this valley that the stem is sitting inside. I've already got my layer of 4H there. This is going to get darker as it goes down and inside. Now I do have a highlight that is kind of sitting inside of here, and I filled it in, so I need to erase that back out. I'm going to use my pencil eraser for that. And then what I'm going to do, kind of took out a little too much. I need to fill that back in. Now I'm going to go in with my 3B. I want to make it look like it's getting darker as it goes down and inside there. Working around that highlight that I see. And then I'm going to take my 6B and make it even darker down here at the bottom. Again, that's going to make it look like it's going down. Then I've got this crown at the top of it, which I think right now I have it's probably a bit too big. I always do that on purpose just because I like to then go back in and just, it gives me some little bit of wiggle room to kind of fix it up. So I'm going to go in and kind of deal with this top. And I think the edge for me looks a little too harsh, so I'm going to go in with my 4H and just kind of feather this out. You might also be able to use perhaps like your kneaded eraser to kind of blend that a little bit more if you need to. So I'm just going to work at the top here a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys the recipe just to kind of mess around with your apple. Again, I don't consider this done at all. In fact, I don't know how to finish it yet. I'm not going to until I get the rest of the drawing going. So I'm going to get this to about what I would consider the 75 to maybe 80% finished range. I know there's probably still a lot that I need to kind of build up. I definitely have a lot I need to darken over here on the left side of my apple. I have some lines I need to tone down a little bit. So those are some of the things I'm going to work on. This is also causing me to do a little bit more work on my back wall, so to speak. I will say that one of the things too that I notice is as I'm shading this, my edge gets a little slappy. I like to go in every once in a while and just kind of clean that up. Alright, so this is what I've got so far. Again, is it finished? No. I even think like this highlight here is a little too big. Cut into that a little bit. All right, so the next step for us is going to be shading the construction paper and cast shadow. Again, we're going to take it about, I'd say 75 to 80% finished. And then what we will do is we'll go in and we will add our darkest value throughout where we need to, tidy some things up, and before you know it, this thing will be finished. So there you go. Continue to work for the rest of the class period on the apple, and then we will move on the next time I see you.